Most of us, and if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you want to grow your practice. It's because you want to increase your impact, your income, and your enjoyment. And as I mentioned beforehand, the avenues that we tend to explore for this tend to be down the sales and marketing way. How do I get more patients and how do I convert them? How do I raise my fees? The foundational thing that's missing out is, am I good at what I do? How can I help my practice members get better results? And when I help my practice member get better results, they stay around for longer and they tell more of their friends. This increases our confidence. It then means we feel more confident we're going out and marketing our message to the world. These 9 steps will help you be better in 2025. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Now, when most chiropractors are thinking about how to grow their practice, whether it's for the coming year or beyond, their minds tend to naturally jump to 2 areas, sales and marketing. And by sales, I really mean, how do we get better at the initial consultation, the report of findings? These are part of the sales sequence. And marketing, we're talking about anything from social media to Facebook ads to community events to dinner with a doc, all of these sorts of things. Now, look, that side of our practice is essential. It's not just important, it's essential. We do need to put ourselves out there. We do need to be connecting with our community. We need to let people know that we exist. But today I want to talk about a foundation that often gets overlooked, and that is simply getting better at what you do. Now, here's the truth. If you want your practice to grow in 2025 or any year for that matter, the most sustainable way for you to do it is by helping your practice members get better results. That's it. Now, when patients start seeing their lives transform because of your care, they're naturally going to stick around longer. So it's an incredibly impactful retention strategy, okay? They're going to refer their family and their friends, and this is going to become one of your best forms of marketing. But, and there's a huge but here, we need to strike a balance because there's a trap that I see chiropractors fall in all the time when it comes to this. Some of us, in our quest to get better, end up getting stuck. We focus so much on improving our technique and our knowledge, and don't get me wrong, again, these are really, really important, that we never take any action on anything else. There's a form of kind of often imposter syndrome. When I'm good enough, I'll do this. So we end up avoiding marketing. We don't engage with our community. We don't step outside of our comfort zone because we feel that we're not good enough. Now, that sounds familiar. Don't worry, you're not alone. There are a lot of chiropractors that feel this way. I speak with many of them each and every week. But in today's episode, I want to help you find the middle ground. And I'm going to show you through how you can focus on getting better at what you do and do it in a way that doesn't paralyze you. In fact, the cool thing with this, as I mentioned before, this can be the driving force behind your confidence that really allows you to step outside and put yourself out there. So if you're ready to make 2025 your best year yet, let's dive into talking about how you can get better at what you do and how this will help you lead to a busier, more successful, and a more fulfilling practice. Let's dive in. Okay. The first thing we're going to get better at is we're going to get better at being a better listener. Now, most people listen to respond, not to understand. I remember first hearing a quote like that. Most people aren't truly listening. What they're doing is they're waiting for their turn to speak. Now, I'm guilty of this often, and I work really hard at my listening. But when we do this, we miss the subtle cues, the subtle details, and therefore we miss the understanding of really connecting with our patients. One of the things that our practice members are wanting when they come in to see us is they want to be seen and heard. And this means we need to be really great listeners. We need to work on the skill of active listening. Now, so much of what we think about as chiropractors is we're wanting to tell our patients things, how often they need to be in with us, what they need to be doing, and we want to educate them. And all these things are important and you should be doing them. But before we do that, we need to listen to people, okay? When our practice members feel listened to, it massively builds trust, okay? We don't need to educate them. They will naturally follow along because we have that connection. So one of the skills that you really want to work on in 2025 is start to adopt more active listening, okay? Now, active listening is about giving all of your attention, okay? Making eye contact, genuinely focusing on what the other person is saying. We want to repeat back to the patient what they've shared in their own words, use the exact words they have. So if someone's saying something like, they're complaining, if they're sharing their story about, how their sciatica is impacting them, we want to repeat that back, use the words that they actually say as well. We want to ask clarifying questions. Can you tell me more about that? When did the colic start? Okay, how does it show up? This idea of tell me more, this I learned from a wonderful friend of mine and mentor, Russ Rose, and it was one of the things that I said all of the time. In my early days in practice, I shied away from that because I didn't want my practice members complaining. I didn't want to hear about their symptoms. I was selfish. There was way too much ego. I was worried about how long they would go on about it there too. But the reason they continued to go on and on about it is because they didn't feel heard. And I realized once they felt heard, there was no reason for them to continue to say it. So often I was saying, tell me more. So if a practice member came in and I was checking in with them, great to see you. How was your weekend? That conversation came up there too. If they happen to say, oh, look, I had some stinky migraines over there, then the first thing I would do is connect with them. I'm so sorry to hear that. Tell me more. Now, rarely did this end up in a 5-minute kind of, monologue of them sharing every detail of it. Once they felt heard, we could move on into the adjustment. And this often took 15, 20 seconds. Okay. It was very efficient for me. We want to make sure that we're also using looking for non-verbal listening cues. Okay. So, or we're using them rather. So this is things like nodding our head, leaning forwards, maintaining appropriate eye contact. So appropriate eye contact means that we're not just staring at them in the eyes because that's creepy, but we want to make sure that we're doing this as well. We want to make sure that we are avoiding distractions. So if I'm sitting there and talking to you, I don't want to be looking at my watch. I don't want to be looking at the clock. I don't want to be looking at other practice members around there too, because this will tell me that you're distracted. And again, this makes our patients feel like they haven't been heard as well. Another really powerful thing that really good listeners do is they pause before responding. So when a practice member finishes speaking, take a beat before you respond. Maybe a little breath there as well. This, two things, why we want to do this. It gives you time to process, okay? Make sure and ensures that you've fully listened to everything that they've just shared there as well. But second, it also signals to the patient that you're carefully considering what you're about to say, not just jumping in with a pre-planned response. Okay, make sure that you're recognizing the emotional underpinnings as well. So often patients are not just describing their symptoms. They're expressing their frustrations, their fears, and their hopes. And we want to listen for that as well. So it might be saying like this, hey, it really sounds like your pain has really been impacting your daily life. Okay, that's what they're telling us. It really seems like, it sounds to me like the colic and stuff like that you're actually questioning yourself as a parent. Tell me more about that. We want to actually dive in. We want to recognize the emotional underpinnings there too. Another real key thing, and this is something I worked really hard on in practice, is following up on key details, okay? To show that you've retained and acted on what they shared. So for instance, if you're talking to a practice member and because of the current health challenges that they have, they're worried about missing out on work or not being able to continue work or work at the level that they want to, when they're in for their next session, one of the questions you want to ask them as quickly as possible, how have you been managing at work this week? Now that lets them know that you listened last time, you cared about it, and you followed through. Now, I not only wanted to do that with things like that too, but if we were having a conversation, you were telling me that you were excited on the weekend because you're going to eat out at a nice restaurant, I wanted to bring that back up too. If I knew it was, the weekend, one of the kids' birthday parties, or maybe you were going to a sporting event, I wanted to hold on to those key details and I wanted to bring them up. And sometimes the more inconsequential of those things that I could bring up that were a little bit random there too, almost a bit quirky, it really let our practice members know that we were listening, okay? So communication is two things. It's a combination of what we actually say and what we listen to, and we spend way too much time getting really good at, what we say. In 2025, what I want you to do is develop your skills as a better listener. Okay, so let's get into a better talker now, or better communicator, that part of it there. Now, if you're to do that in 2025, I want to encourage you to tell more stories. Now, as I mentioned previously, a big part of what we want to do with our practice members is to educate them, because when we educate people, we give them power. We let them take control of their health. And the fact of the matter is that we live in a different world philosophically and health-wise than our practice members are used to. And so we want to expose them to new ideas. Now, the hurdle we've got to get over is that most people aren't coming to us to see us to learn things. Now, we can hijack this by telling more stories. Stories are ways that humans naturally connect and understand the world. Our practice members are going to remember stories far better than facts or technical explanations. So rather than me wanting to educate my practice members, what I would do is I would just share stories. If I wanted to share a story or educate somebody about the importance of following through care even when the symptoms are gone, then I would share a story with a practice member about a practice member who maybe got some adjustments, got some really wonderful results. Their health challenges disappeared, and then so did they, and then they ended up back up in again. And when I share a story, a parable that takes them through, then they can often put themselves in the same situation, okay? We want to make sure that we keep our stories concise. We want to make sure that we tie them back to us. So sometimes the practice members in the story will be so obvious for them, but sometimes we want to, if I've gone through that story there too and we've shared it, we want to say, look, this is why it's really important that we don't use the symptoms as the only guide of how you're measuring. I don't want to see you back in here in 2 months' time again with this same flare-up of your asthma again. Whilst your breathing is improved, which is really great, we've still got a lot of subluxation and tension through this middle part of the back, okay? So tell more and better stories. Now, this means that what you need to do is you need to start harvesting and mining stories. There were several stories that I shared, okay, and I would roll them out, but probably 10 or 15 stories tops. These were stories of previous practice members. These are other stories or anecdotes that I would share through. So you don't need a lot of them. And you can tell the stories and see whether they land or not. The second thing I want you to think about with your communication is really simplifying your language. Okay, so often, now, I was a big fan of having my patients understand the word subluxation, but I also interchanged that. I would talk about a misalignment affects how your body functions. I would talk about it as a traffic jam. I was happy to say as stiffness and tightness. And I would use these words interchangeably until I really knew that my practice members had it, okay? I'm a big fan of using analogies, okay? This allows us to make abstract concepts really tangible. So things like this. Think of your spine like a stack of building blocks. If one is out of alignment, the whole structure is often affected. So when I wanted to let somebody know that subluxation in any area affects everywhere, I'd often say, think of your spine a little bit like a stack of building blocks. If one of them is out of alignment, the whole structure is affected, okay? And then we can check for understanding. Does that make sense? Or we can watch for nonverbal cues. We can see when someone's eyes glaze over, okay? The next thing I want you to think about with your communication is I want you to get better at asking questions. Ask more questions. Asking questions helps to ensure that you're addressing the priorities. What's the biggest thing that's holding you back right now? These sorts of questions there too, or even just tell me more. I mentioned that as well. So how has this been impacting your life? Those migraines sound like they've been, huge. How have you been coping with that? That sounds terrible. What would it mean to you if you're able to pick up your kids without discomfort? I know this is a big goal for you, but why is that important? When we get good at asking questions, we get to find out a whole bunch more information. Now, I got in trouble often because I assumed things. I remember a young guy coming in to see me. He was in for his Monday adjustment, wasn't due back again for another fortnight, but I saw him back in the practice on Thursday. So he was in there on Thursday. I checked in with him on the table. How's things going? He says, my neck is really, really sore. Now, I immediately jumped to the conclusion that it had something to do with the adjustment that he had on Monday. And I went into this whole story about unwinding, and sometimes that happens after an adjustment there too. And like when you go to the gym for the first time, sometimes you get sore after that. And I went into this whole thing. And he looked around at me after that and he goes, that's interesting. I thought it might have been the car accident I had on Tuesday. I felt like a fool because I didn't ask. And so whenever practice members come in with symptoms, new symptoms, the same symptoms again, one of the questions I would often ask is, why do you think that is? So go back to that person who I mentioned earlier who was having the problems with the migraines on the weekends, checking in. Hey, Bill, great to see you today. Anything new or different? Yeah, I had some migraines on the weekend. I'm so sorry to hear that. Tell me more. Why do you think that was? Often what I see chiropractors do is they're taking the blame, or we're trying to say things like, wait around, chiropractic will get there. When more times than not, it's got nothing to do with us at all, and everything to do with the lifestyle the person is living there too. Think about adapting your communication style, okay? We want to match the communication style of the practice member. We know that we've got those real type A personalities there that just want the information, okay? We've got that person that's really technical where we want to go through the x-rays in great detail. We've got those other people that are really emotionally, I can see how this is affecting you, okay? We're going to work on this right now so that we can help to improve those sorts of things there too. Watch for nonverbal cues that indicate whether they're following along or you need a different approach, okay? Now, intuitively, we can pick up all of these things. We know how people like to be communicated to. And so don't just naturally communicate to them in your style. Find out how they are, okay? Many times what your front desk CA, a front desk person, will have been having a whole bunch of conversations with them prior, and they can give you a little bit of this. I touched base on this beforehand, but one of the things that you want to do if you want to be a great communicator is develop and use metaphors. Now, why does the metaphors work? They work because they simplify complex ideas and they create memorable connections. We take something that's complicated and we make it like something that they already know. So your nervous system is like a highway. If there's a traffic jam, the messages take slower or longer to get through. And this is why you're experiencing some of your health challenges at the moment. Now, we could share that, or we could get talking about disafferentation, subluxation, sympathetic overwhelm, all these sorts of things there. Now, with time, the right person will get into those, but simple metaphors, okay? Chiropractic care is like brushing your teeth. It's about maintaining health, not just fixing a problem, okay? Now, you want to have a few go-to metaphors. My favorite one that I used so much was just the smoke alarm. I wanted people to understand where their pain and symptoms fit into things, okay? That's the smoke alarm. That's the sound that's going off. We've got to deal with that as well. But more importantly, we've got to make sure that we put the fire out underneath. And what do you suppose happens if we just turn off the smoke alarm and don't deal with the fire? So here we've linked in their metaphors with asking a question. Now, when you're a great communicator, you're also going to have multiple tools. So we're going to have, verbally what we say as well, but we want visual tools. I had posters all around the practice. They had glass over the top of them, and I often wrote on them. I grabbed a pen, I went over and wrote on it there too. I wanted to circle the area that was stressed in their body. So visually, some people worked really, loved that too. I had spinal models around. So, those little kind of sections of the spine, and I would show those. I would let them feel how the spine moved and didn't move. We would show them where the nerve actually exited from the spine, and the stress and tension that could happen through the nervous system when the spine was out of balance there too. There are digital tools that are available now also, pre-care tools where people often watch videos that can show through some of the anatomy. So you want to have multiple different ways of letting people experience this. Also, kinesthetic. We want to allow our patients to feel and engage with things. So if there was a stiffness in a joint there too, I want to stop and say, feel this here. Now, again, compare this to lower down in the spine. Can you feel the difference in that? This is what a tight, ropey muscle feels like, okay? It's scar tissue here. Let's compare it to this side. If range of motion wasn't great, I wanted them to experience turn left, turn right. What do you notice here? Okay, it's harder to the right. Do that again. And that way, these are important here if they feel it, because after an adjustment, when it changes, I'm adding another level of value, okay? So these first two things that we've talked about, if we want to get better in 2025, is communication. First, be a better listener, and then learn to be a better talker, okay? Thing number 3, when we're going to get better in 2025, is technique mastery. Okay, I want to encourage you to do a few different ways that we can approach this. At its simplest, just go back and review your notes from the technique seminars that you've already been to. Okay, technique is a bit like a muscle. If you don't revisit it, if you don't strengthen it, it can atrophy. Okay, there's the use of a metaphor for you as well. So spend some time reviewing your original training materials. Okay, identify any areas that may have deviated or you've simplified over time. Now, this happens. The last kind of 10, 12 years in practice, I practiced Thompson. And I had a couple of really great videos there as well, Rob Jackson, where he went through it. And I'd often just pop one of those in and have a watch it. I also had some technique books that I would go through. And it would amaze me, one or two key bits would just disappear. I forgot to do that. I haven't been doing that over the last, I'm not doing my sacrum adjustment that way, or, that negative deer field. I've stopped looking for this key component, okay? So we want to review ourselves and just kind of check back in. Now, maybe you want to reattend a training, okay? Again, you'll be tempted to tell yourself that you've already got mastery in around this. But one of the things I notice of really great chiropractors, and I deal with a lot of those inside of community influencers, even those that are real masters of their technique, they're regularly going back again. Now, whether it's to help teach other chiropractors, but also to look for insights as well. So, pick a seminar, whether it is one that you've already done as well. And in this situation here, we're talking about one that you've already done there too, and go back in as a student. Now, of course, there's also the opportunity to explore a new technique. And this is something, sadly, that, as I mentioned beforehand, that, Thompson is a way that I practiced for the last kind of decade. But I went through 5 or 6 years where I didn't look at anything outside of that. And it wasn't until, after that period that I started just jumping in on some other techniques. I learned some fabulous kind of first rib adjustments, some standing adjustments. I got some great things out of ABC technique. And it's not about saying I have to swap right over to this technique, but often we can pick up 1 or 2 things that really make it worthwhile, okay? You want to look for, where are your gaps? If the things that you have coming into practice and you really find it difficult, upper cervical adjustment, lower spine adjustment, ribs, those sorts of things there too. Look for those gaps and see if you can find something to fill them as well. So, consider a different technique, maybe a lower force technique, maybe a higher force technique as well. Now, another thing that you could do is you could ask friends. Many of us as chiropractors are adjusting other chiropractors, and we could ask them for some feedback. I know we've got our unique approach to it, but we could ask them, hey, listen, I'm really looking at my technique. I know that you come here each week for your adjustment. I'd love some feedback. And we need to be open for it as well. In many ways, it's not valuable when someone says your adjustments are fantastic, the best in the world. They might be, but the chances are they're not. And chances are that you have some areas for you could actually improve. Okay. So just ask for some feedback, and or on that same thing, when you're talking to peers, ask them about their gems. Okay, what are their technique gems that they have? What works really great? Again, if it's like I often have difficulty adjusting that cervicothoracic area there too. How do you go about this? Pregnant women, okay, young kids, what are your go-to for this? We don't spend enough time actually sharing back and forwards. Get really good at your technique, okay? We should. This is, I remember hearing Andrew Cameron, great chiropractor over here in Australia, talk about this. If we were golfers, we would be spending the vast majority of our time in practice, okay, not in competition. When we're seeing patients, that's like competition. We should be practicing our technique. We should be regularly honing it, whether that's feedback from our friends, new techniques, reviewing techniques. This is an important part of it as well, okay? And all of those steps there will really help you. Let's move on to step number 4, if we're to get better in 2025, and that is commit to continuing education. Now, we've talked about continuing education here from a technique point of view, but I want to talk here now about building rock solid certainty. Our patients can really sense when you're confident and when you're not. Now, certainty in your knowledge and your approach transforms how you show up in practice, okay? So you want to start now to identify areas where you feel less confident. Okay, now whether it's the science behind chiropractic, whether it's particular niches, as I mentioned beforehand, pediatric care, understanding some of the assessment stuff, or whether it's broader health trends, you want to commit to learning in those areas there too. Okay, so if you find yourself sometimes hesitating to explain how the adjustment affects the nervous system, prioritize seminars or resources that focus on neurophysiology. All right. Now we want to look for science-based seminars, okay? Seminars that are rooted in science to help you confidently explain the why behind what you do, okay? But also in seminars, when we're trying to upskill ourselves, we might be niche specific. So if you've decided that you're really not great at looking after pregnant women, then we need to find those sorts of seminars, athletes, pediatric care. There's now more and more of this. And the benefit is lots of it's online. Some of the technique stuff is hard to do online, although we can learn it. As I mentioned beforehand, I had a fabulous set of, in those days, DVDs of Thompson. When we're talking about kind of ongoing education, the other thing we want to do is we want to stay ahead of the trends. Understanding emerging health trends positions you as a thought leader, keeps your practice cutting edge also. So things like, at the moment, polyvagal is just almost becoming part of the lexicon. We're hearing about this. There's conversations in around the microbiome's role in health, the impact that a chiropractic adjustment has on the brain. Okay, so we want to learn, for instance, how does the polyvagal theory tie into stress management and your adjustment? Can you communicate? Can you understand this? Can you take a leadership role at too? Now, this might mean, and often is, that we need to explore non-chiropractic resources. We need to look outside our profession. This is a good thing because it often sparks innovation. Don't get stuck at just looking inside of here, okay? Again, leverage online courses. This is not something that we need to be doing all in person. And also, when we're looking to educate ourselves, keep a finger on the pulse of the patient world. What books, what health books are your practice members reading? Who's popular in that area? And again, this can be just as simple as jumping over onto Amazon and finding out, what are the most popular books there? If you're doing lots of fertility-based care or pediatric care, there's books that, whether it be Dan Siegel or, whatever books, Lauren, my gorgeous wife, is buying books on this stuff all the time. I get at least 2, if not 3 books from Amazon, and they're all things that she's interested in because she wants to help her patients. Okay. All right. Number 5. If we're going to get better in 2025, help our practice members get better results, deliver more value, we need to start better using outcome measures, okay? Now, why is it that outcome measures matter, okay? Beyond just, hey, your symptoms have gone away. Your colic's gone, your digestive system's better, you're less anxious, your sciatica's gone. That's all great. We will see that sort of thing there too. But chiropractic, and particularly longer care chiropractic care, exists after the symptom's gone. That's really where the magic happens. And so our practice members need to see and understand that if symptoms aren't there, they're not the only indicator that there could be subluxation, i.e. stress on your spine and nervous system, okay? Now, these outcome measures, when we use them right, they build trust and credibility. So objective measures provide concrete evidence of improvement, and they reinforce the value of your continued care. They allow us to reframe the narrative, as I talked about before, explain that the pain is often the last thing to come and the first thing to go. Okay, so again, we could go back to this metaphor again. Think of pain a little bit like a smoke alarm. Okay, it tells you that there's a fire, but putting out the smoke alarm doesn't mean that the fire is out. So we want to teach our practice members the role of these outcome measures. Hey, it's super important here that we help you with the sciatica that you're having and some of the issues that you're having with your fertility there as well. But I'm going to be really focused on your posture because this is the underlying problem. These symptoms are a bit like an iceberg. They see what's happening on top there. This posture underneath, most of the problem is underneath there. Now, there are lots of different objective tools that we can use. Posture I just talked about before. And if we're going to use posture, use some of the fancy software, that's available nowadays where we can draw on posture pictures. It measures how much forward head carriage. It measures the amount of imbalance. Often what it can do is then, suggest home care and things like that too. Range of motion assessment. Again, don't just measure the range of motion. You can get fancy little digital range of motion assessments, okay? Thermography, EMG, heart rate variability. Huge fan of the subluxation station. It was a key part of our communication because an objective measurement of the nervous system. Now, many of you might say, well, it doesn't measure back pain. It's not meant to measure back pain. It's looking at the nervous system. X-rays are a powerful tool. They provide clear before and after evidence of structural shifts. Now, some of you might be thinking, I don't want to take before and after X-rays because, I don't do postural work here. I do very gentle tonal work, whether it be SOT or network. I can tell you there was a long period there where I did TRT, at least for kind of 12 or 18 months, and I continue to re-X-ray people and it changes. Okay, the spine doesn't change shape because we panel beat it back in there. The spine changes shape because we decrease stress on the nervous system. It changes the way the brain and the body is talking. It reorganizes motor and movement patterns. And again, when we give some home care along with this, the spine changes shape. Okay, now we need to make sure that we present these results in a visual and a patient-friendly way. Okay, so they understand them. Sometimes I do remember once going along to a technique seminar. Sorry, it wasn't a technique, it was a seminar where the guy was talking about EEG. And he was showing before to after changes in brainwave patterns when we adjusted people. The software was so complicated. The reports of it were so complicated. It just wasn't ready yet. Now, this was more than a decade ago, and I don't know whether somebody's worked out how to do it now. But it's only a matter of time before we can show changes in brain function pre and post. Now, when we're using these objective measures, if we want to be more valuable, we need to make sure that we create simple, consistent progress reports, okay? So patients need to see their progress regularly, not just at the start of the care. The big mistake that chiropractors do is we front load our care. Everything happens. We get a great initial consultation, a great report of findings. The first 12 visits are rocking, the first progress exam, maybe up to visit 24. And then after that, we lose the love. We need to make sure that we're continuing with our progress exams, okay? A summary of here's where you were, here's where you are, here's our focus over this next stage. And these objective outcome measures become a really powerful tool for our retention. Okay, we use them to educate. We use them to guide further care there as well. We allow our patients to see that it's not just their symptoms are going, they can see a bigger picture. So we need to make sure that we integrate these measurements into our retention strategies. Okay, so key here in 2025, get together and choose some really good outcome measures. Okay, number 6. If you help your practice members get better results and deliver more value, then get better at your follow-up. Now, follow-up is about fostering a deeper relationship with your patients. It ensures that they feel supported at every stage of their care. Again, it allows them to feel seen and heard and validated. Now, there are 2 broad categories that I want you to think about your follow-up with your practice members. There's one-to-one follow-up. Now, this is the most impactful, okay, but it's also the most energy intense, okay? Following up one-on-one with all of our patients really regularly can be overwhelming. Sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day. But there's several different ways that we can have one-on-one, and I think there's certain circumstances where we should have one-on-one follow-up with our practice members, okay? So simple could be just a phone call. And again, when should we be doing this? And it might be, again, after a first adjustment. I always called my practice members after their first adjustment. And it continued to surprise them, and they were impressed that they would get a call from the doctor. Again, I pre-framed this beforehand, and it might be just, "Hi, Jane, I just want to check in after your adjustment yesterday. What have you noticed that's improved?" Now, that second part of the question there, notice I don't ask, "How are you feeling?" I asked, "What's improved?" It elicits a very different answer from "How are you feeling?" Now, we pre-framed all of this beforehand, let them know that there were 3 different ways. You might feel no change, you might feel sore, or you might feel some improvement. All of those are okay, all right? So again, after milestone visits, "Hey, John, do you know what? Today, I just noticed you had your 100th adjustment. That means that we've been under care for nearly 18 months. And I just wanted to touch base and say thank you for your trust, for letting me be a part of your healthcare team. Me and the team there too, we super appreciate that." So these are a phone call that you could have. Again, a phone call when something rough is going on. Practice members in there, maybe they've lost their job. Maybe there's a loved one that's sick. Just a phone call to check in and see how things are going. Now, what I noticed, and you probably will too, is that certainly for the latter part of my career, is that people were answering their phone a lot less, unless they had my number in their phone. And this is one reason that I asked them, or certainly the front desk is this is Angus's phone number here. This is after hours. Can you please pop it in your phone right now? And that way, if they got a phone call, they knew that it was coming from me and they were answering it. Okay, so phone calls. So in the end, what I mostly did is I sent a lot of text messages. Now, again, I had a busy practice. I was adjusting 300-400 people a week, but I had plenty of downtime there. And in those downtimes, what I often did is I just sent quick text messages, just mostly for check-ins. "Hey, Sarah, it's Angus here. I just wanted to check in how things been at home this week with the, little Susie." Whatever it is, I wanted to just touch base with them. "How are you going with those exercises? Did you get a chance to head down to the naturopath yet? Have you had that other appointment there too?" I wanted to make sure these were really personal, so they knew that it wasn't coming from an automation tool as well. Handwritten notes. We used to all do this as a team. For a number of years there, we had a rule that every person in the team, including the CAs, had to write 3 handwritten thank you notes every week. We post them out to patients. We could thank them for anything. And sometimes it was just the simplest of, "Hey, Sue, I just want to say thank you. Every time you come into our office, you brighten our office. To see you smile, every couple of weeks there too is a really wonderful thing. Thanks for being a part of our chiropractic family." Little things like that. Handwritten notes. Thank them for their referrals. That's a great thing that you could do. "Hey, thanks for sending so-and-so in there. We really appreciate your trust. It means the world to us. We promise we'll do everything we can to give them the care that they need as well." Now, the tool doesn't really matter. What matters is the intent, the personalization. What matters is the fact that you took the time to actually reach out to this practice member. Now, as I mentioned beforehand, it's hard to leverage this, okay? And that's why we want to make sure that what we're doing also is that we have lots of one-to-many follow-up. We need to make sure that we're constantly connecting with our practice members and reminding them of our value and adding value to them in between our visits. And again, these broader communications are designed to keep your entire patient base informed and engaged. Email is a fantastic thing to you doing this, okay? Now, I think that you should be emailing your practice members at least twice a month. Now, different people have different recommendations, and you might find that Look, if I email them, once a quarter, I get a really high open rate. And then when I'm emailing them twice a month, the open rate comes down. And you will notice that to some extent there too. But if the emails that you are delivering are really high quality and if they're valuable, and I've had plenty of episodes through this, scoop back through where I talk about how to add value through email there too, people will open them. And you should be expecting at the low point, 30% of people open, but it's probably going to be closer to 40, maybe even 50% of people will open them, okay? And again, monthly newsletters. It could be a promotion that's going on for a workshop that's happening there too. It could be maybe you've just created a great social media video where you've dived into, big mistakes that parents are making with their colicky babies. Whatever it is there also, we want to make sure that we're emailing our practice members, at least once a fortnight. The second thing is social media. Now, social media is not just about engaging new patients. It's also connecting with and re-engaging with our existing ones. It means that we get to stay top of mind there too, okay? Now, there's a psychological phenomenon called the mere exposure effect. I've talked about it a lot here that just says the more often we see somebody, the more of an affinity that we create with them. We want to be just showing up everywhere for our practice members, okay? So, we're sending out a card every now and then, a handwritten note, a text message, they get an email from us, they see us on social media, they see us at community events there too. And again, we can be running workshops. One of the big things of the workshops, while we might want to be running those too, is the more spots that we connect with our practice members, not just inside the adjusting area, the deeper the relationship gets, okay? So for those of you that might have practice members who have kids that go to the same school, and you see them at morning pickup and afternoon pickup, and then maybe at school events on the weekends, there's often a stronger connection with those people because you're seeing them in multiple different places. And we can orchestrate the same thing by having workshops as well, okay? So remember, we want to be regularly catching up and communicating with our practice members, one-on-one when you can, but certainly group. Email is a fantastic way for you to be doing that. It's my favorite tool for to be managing that. But blending together one-on-one and one-to-many follow-ups creates a really comprehensive strategy that will help to keep your patients engaged. It scales your efforts efficiently as well, okay? All right, let's go on to number 7 here, and this is practice environment we're talking about too. The moment a patient walks through your door, they're forming opinions about your care, okay? Now, we might think it has everything to do with our adjustment, all those type of things, and that's a part of it. But if your environment is dirty and outdated, it tells them what to expect. It doesn't prime them for the adjustment. A welcoming, professional environment sets the stage for trust and comfort. Like, I'm thinking, if you can't even manage to keep a clean office, how can you take care of me and my family's spine and nervous system? I can't trust you for that, okay? So we want to make sure that we have a clean, organized, and visually appealing space. Now, this is something most chiropractors are still doing a lousy job of this. Now, I think across the board, it's really improved. I go into some chiropractic offices now and my jaw drops. It's beautiful. Like, these are amazing looking places, okay? So it should be cleaned and organized, okay? Do you have a daily cleaning routine for certainly for your reception area and for your adjustment rooms? Tables wiped down so they're not dusty. I remember, before I had a real routine of this, having a look underneath my table. So when my practice members would lay their head down and look through that spot there, the grease and the dust that would kind of track through it was revolting. That's not something that I would want to be breathing in. And I'm not a believer in the germ theory, but I don't need to be breathing that stuff in. But either way, it shows me that you're not thorough in what you're doing, okay? So make sure desks, counters, shelves, free from dust. Now, I'll be the first to admit in this situation, I'm a big fan of a cupboard. So if things are messy, take them, shove them in a cupboard. That's another matter there too. So as long as they can't see it, that's the first point. And again, it would make sense for you to make sure that things are cleaned up. But it's not just about clean, it's about aesthetic appeal. Aesthetic choices contribute to the patient's overall experience and their emotional comfort. So sometimes I go into offices and they're really clean and they're neat, but they're 1980s still. You can see that nothing has been changed since 1980s. Think about the colors, what's modern now, what's work, soft blues, greens, neutral tones. These tend to create a really calming atmosphere. Incorporate plants, natural elements into a space there too can take off that hard clinical edge there as well. modern decor. Just because we bought some pictures and we had them framed doesn't mean that those pictures have to stay there for eternity. So when I put posters up on my wall, we had about 14 out around the practice, but I had 25 pictures and they constantly rotated around. So they changed spots. So it looked different, looked like there was always changing. We had fresh flowers in the practice each and every week. We want to keep your environment so it's aesthetically very pleasing. Now, not just for you, but for your ideal patients. Who's your practice designed for? We want it to feel comfortable for them as well, okay? A comfortable reception area, music, streamlined flow, easy for our practice members to get through. What is your adjustment rooms like? Is there enough room? Okay, this is where the magic happens, and it should feel professional. It should instill confidence in there. Is the leather on your tables cracked? Is it ripped? Is it, does it just get that stuff fixed? We want to keep our adjusting tables cleaned and really well maintained. And then we've got personalized touches, things that align with your brand. Is it photographs of you and your family? Again, we don't always have to have chiropractic pictures up. In fact, if I was designing a practice again now, prior to this, I had only chiropractic pictures, but I wouldn't have that now, okay? I would have different artwork up there also, okay? So these are all things that we need to kind of really think about is environment. Let's move on to number 8. We've got just a couple to go here as well. And this is creating a culture of committed staff that are committed to your vision and your patients. It's not just you as the doctor that has the impact on the results that your practice members get. In fact, I would say that our staff have almost as much and many times even more impact from how they answer the phone. Do they support the practice member when they walk through the door? Do they remember their name? Is there a lovely smile? A culture or the culture within your practice determines how your staff interact with the patients and each other. Now, if your culture is strong and aligned with your vision and excellence in patient care, that's really going to make a difference, okay? We need to understand my staff from the moment they started working with me, it was important for them to know that they were part of the healing journey. Across the front desk, when you walked in, the sign said, your healing starts here. Now, this means many things. First of all, it means that we need to hire the right people, okay? Now, I've done some deeper conversations in around this, but there's two different ways that we can look at it. Are we hiring family? Are we trying to create a family? Or are we trying to create a team that wins? Now, the challenge is when we employ and our culture is family-based, we treat family in a very different way than we treat a team. Family, we put up with poor behavior because we love them no matter what. But we shouldn't be doing that with staff. It's not a behave however you want inside of here. In fact, I'll go as far to say is that almost every challenge that a chiropractor has with their staff comes from this idea that they treat them as family. Now, this doesn't mean that if we have a team that's designed to win, that it's cold. It should never be cold at all. In fact, I would say that when we prioritize a team to win, it can be the best thing because we can get really clear on what the expectations are of our staff. So we can define and communicate the vision. We can define and communicate the job role. We can have really clear KPIs so people know what's expected. Relationships work really well when we're clear on expectations, okay? So we want to make sure that we do this and we have a team here that all works together, that supports each other, that has each other's back, okay? This means that probably some people on your team right now shouldn't be there. Now, again, we don't have to be cold-hearted about this. If they're not a fit for your team, it means there's a better job for them somewhere else. Now, before we go throwing people out the door, we should have the opportunity to train them, to inspire them, and invite them into what the vision is for the practice. But simply put here, if you want your practice to provide more value and to help to get your patients better results, you need a team around you, okay? A team that supports the vision also, okay? Final thing that we're going to really finish up with here now is creating, again, a culture of feedback. Now, why is it that feedback matters? Okay, feedback provides a window into the patient experience. It reveals what's working and where you can improve. And then also what it does, when we address concerns before they escalate, you turn potential detractors into loyal advocates. This means it enhances retention. Now, there's several different ways that we want to be getting feedback. The one I recommend and that we train on inside of Community Influencer is a simple thing called a Net Promoter Score, okay? I dare say that you would have received a Net Promoter Score message beforehand. It would have been an email that would have been sent to you, or maybe an SMS that would have just said, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer our business to a friend or a loved one, okay? There's a certain way that we go about scoring that. You can do a bit of a search on Net Promoter Score and you will find that. But we don't want to be using the Net Promoter Score on its own. It gives us some really good information. It's easy to do there as well. But sometimes it looks at things more globally. One of the interesting things that you could do is that you could pick a day next week and you could do a short post-visit survey. Everybody that has an adjustment on Thursday, we could ask them, how's your experience today? Did the practice run on time? Was the practice clean and welcoming? How's your experience at the front desk? How was your adjustment? And sometimes when we're doing the Net Promoter Score, we don't get granular information like that. We could put up a focus group. Okay, these used to be really popular a decade ago. I don't hear chiropractors doing these as much nowadays, where we get a group of practice members together. Someone comes in and interviews them. Again, we can get a lot of information out of these. Exit surveys for patients who leave. What led you to discontinue your care with us? Now, often we don't want to do this because we don't want to hear the information, but hearing this information and knowing that you can change it can be really valuable for you. You could have a suggestion box, physical or digital. You should be listening on social media, and of course you should be getting feedback from your team as well. These are all things that'll help you create feedback, which will really help you to improve. Let's sum and bring all of this together. Most of us, and if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you want to grow your practice, okay? It's because you want to increase your impact, your income, and your enjoyment. And as I mentioned beforehand, the avenues that we tend to explore for this tend to be down the sales and marketing way. How do I get more patients and how do I convert them? How do I raise my fees? But the foundational thing that's missing out is, am I good at what I do? How can I help my practice members get better results? And when I help my practice member get better results, they stay around for longer, okay, and they tell more of their friends. This increases our confidence. It then means we feel more confident with going out and marketing our message to the world. There were 9 steps I think I went through today to go through. The first is this: become a better listener, okay? Rather than worrying about the words you're saying, listen first, because that'll help you make sure that your practice members are seen and heard. This builds trust, takes a lot of stress and pressure off step number 2, which is become a better communicator. We talked about tell more stories, ask more questions, okay? Have multiple different communication frameworks. Number 3 was get good at your technique, and whether that's revisiting the technique that you do now or whether it be starting a new one. Get feedback from your peers. Ask them about their technique gems there as well. Step number 4 was commit to continuing education. Get certain. Certainty is something that comes across in everything that you do. Again, this means that we might need to look outside of chiropractic, not just inside of it. Is there niche specific things that we need to learn also? Okay. Start to implement some outcome measures into your practice. Let patients understand. This will help to show them too that care beyond resolution of symptoms, that's where the bigness of chiropractic is. Okay, several different tools. Get better at your patient follow-up. Make sure that we're connecting with them both one-on-one when appropriate and one-to-many. Emails, handwritten notes, text messages, these are the sorts of things that will help you connect to your practice members both one-on-one. Number 7 is look at the practice environment. Is it clean? Is it organized? What is the aesthetics like? When was the last time that you updated your environment as well? Number 8 was all about staff culture and creating a culture that's committed to the vision of the patients and helping them get better results. And the final thing was, again, a culture of feedback. These 9 steps will help you be better in 2025. And the better you are in 2025, the more impact, the more income, and more enjoyment that you will have. Folks, that's it for this episode. I think as you're listening to this, it's either just been Christmas or about to be Christmas. I hope you have a lovely Christmas or had a great Christmas or holiday season, whatever it is that you celebrate through that too. Best of wishes for the new year as well. Can't wait to help you and your team grow your practice in 2025. Love you, folks. Thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.